helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness with thought leaders. Now, research shows a lot more people are thinking marijuana is not that big of a deal now that it's legal in more places. But what about teens? Can marijuana really hurt their brains? And if so, how? Helene DeJay is the Executive Director of Young Adult Services at Newport Healthcare, coming to us from Fairfield, Connecticut. But I know you have branches all over. So thank you for being here. This is a great episode, not only for parents, but for perhaps they want to share this with their teens. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, the idea that marijuana is not that serious of a drug, is that wrong, especially for teens?
It is wrong. It's a little misguided. And I think it's important to start with the fact that marijuana of today is not the same as the marijuana of our high school years. The potency of marijuana has increased probably fourfold in the past 20 years.
Wow.
And really potency and frequency of use are the best indicators of brain issues in teenagers and young people. You know, the developing brain is a very malleable thing, and it's very reactive to substances.
So essentially, when a teenager is smoking marijuana, which they may think, oh, that's a rite of passage, oh, it's no big deal. I mean, look, now you walk through the streets and you can smell it, and it is, you see it more places now.
Yeah.
It's very prevalent. But the difference, if a teenager is doing it versus an adult doing it, there's a big difference?
There is. Most experts agree that the human brain isn't fully developed until about the age of 25 or 26. The prefrontal cortex, where decision-making and a lot of our cognition, logic, that's all resides in the prefrontal cortex, which isn't fully developed until 25. Teenagers are generally using their other parts of their brain, which is why they're so tied into emotion, and you see so many emotional reactivity from teenagers. And marijuana use, high potency, frequent marijuana use, really has an effect on the prefrontal cortex.
So how is it showing up? How would it hurt them?
It shows up in, it sort of interferes with that sort of synaptical pruning that happens, where you prune away the parts of the brain that you aren't using, the synapses that you're not using as much, and then you develop new ones, and it's a really important part of development.
Okay, so in layman's terms, your brain is going through this massive growth spurt,
Exactly.
where it's actually like pruning or weeding away the parts you don't need as much,
Right.
creating new connections.
Exactly.
And when a teenager smokes marijuana, it interferes with that process, which could create effects that could last lifelong.
It could. It could affect cognitive delays. It could affect decision-making capability. It puts you at a higher risk for anxiety, for depression, and most notably, it can really put you at a higher risk of psychosis.
So I don't think most people associate psychosis with marijuana, but this is something that you see at your clinics with teens undergoing marijuana-induced psychosis?
Yes, yes. And
what is that?
It's a psychotic state that's from substance use, and we've seen it with marijuana. We've seen it with other substances as well. And what you see is a detachment from reality. You see a lot of paranoia. You see some really significant effects that, for the most part, if you stop the marijuana use and you get treatment right away, you can reverse it. I have seen cases where kids have been struggling with this for a couple of years, even though they've stopped using substances. It's a very scary thing, and I think a lot of people don't realize that the potency and the frequency of use of marijuana itself can really affect that.
So, right, when parents were growing up, if they were someone who experimented in high school or college with marijuana, you're saying that is not the same game at all today?
It really isn't. The potency of marijuana right now is so much higher, and in addition, we've vigured out other means of ingesting it, gummies, vaping, and for the most part, in vaping, the potency of THC can be about 90%, which is very, very high, much higher than if you smoked the marijuana of our high school years.
So Right, so vaping, just so parents understand, you can vape nicotine. We talk about that on the news all the
Right.
time, but you can also vape marijuana. And what
Yes.
does it look like, smell like? How would you know?
The smell, you don't really smell it like you smell marijuana that you would smoke.
Which is
It's
why
much-
teens prefer that
It's
sometimes.
much easier to cover up. And
They could be
it's-
doing it in their bedroom and you might not know.
Exactly, exactly. And a couple of drags from a vape, could equal a lot more marijuana smoked. So the potency is high and they continue to use it. With the gummies, it's much harder to regulate how many you have because they're tasty little candies.
And it's not regulated. So
And
like
it's-
one
nothing's
gummy could have
regulated.
more than the other. I mean,
Absolutely.
even if your teen is openly discussing that kids are doing this or that they've tried it or it's no big deal, I guess what you need them to understand, A, it's a big deal, but there's no regulation in this. You have no idea
None.
what's in that gummy.
You have no idea what's in it. And now
Even though we have dispensaries now.
even though we have dispensaries, but understand that in most states, marijuana use is limited to 21 and up.
Yeah.
So you can't go as a teenager to buy regulated marijuana from a dispensary.
Let me just to answer this, because teens will say this, someone got this at the dispensary, or
Right.
someone's parent, I mean, I guess I'm not one of them, but some parents would say they'd rather, if you want to try this, I'll get it for you from the dispensary.
Yes.
Is there even more of a safeguard that way?
I mean, I imagine if your parents are getting it for you, that's another story altogether.
Yeah.
But, if 21, 22-year-olds are getting this from a dispensary, they're certainly not passing it down to you at the same price. And even if they are, they might be mixing it. You don't know what's in it. There's no way to really tell what it's been cut with.
Okay, so at a dispensary, for an adult who's buying it legally,
Yes.
you do know what's in it. Is
You
that
do
true?
know. That's what they say. That's
Okay.
what they say.
Okay. So from where you sit, what are you seeing that you really want parents to understand, and teens who care about their health long term, about why this isn't just no big deal?
Well, I mean, I think for a developing teenager or young adult, it's really important to think about what you're putting in your body and the effect it's having. I think a lot of teenagers don't realize it. They say it's natural, it grows naturally, people pick it, you can smoke it, it's not something that I should worry about. But that's not really the case. Like I said, it's way more potent. It could be mixed with things. It can also have respiratory effects. It can affect their ability to play sports, to think clearly.
What about kids who already have attention challenges like ADHD? Would this make it worse?
I mean, it can affect your ability to focus. It can affect memory. It can affect a lot of things. And kids that are already struggling with ADHD are already struggling with those things.
Mm-hmm.
So it can make it worse for sure.
Okay. I mean, the movies, all that, the stereotype of the stoner later on of like,
How cool it is.
Yeah, where they just kind of seem kind of out of it. People think that's the worst thing that could happen to you, is you might be a little out of it, or you get a little hungry. And that's the message that you really want to get out, that that's not really the case. You've seen kids break down with psychotic episodes.
I have. And
marijuana.
And really scary episodes, and they're terrified, and they don't know what's going on. I used to work on the adolescent campus, and there was a boy there that had been struggling for 2 years with symptoms of psychosis from bad marijuana that he got. We actually had him speak in some groups because, he wished he had never gone down that path. And, for him, we're not even sure if he's able to reverse it at this point.
So how does he live? What are his symptoms? Someone like that who...
Well, he's got to be on medication for the rest of his life, it seems. A lot of times substance-induced psychosis is medication resistant, and it's really hard to get it under control.
And if people are wondering what exactly is psychosis, it might be that you said disconnection from reality, but meaning they might hear voices. They might
hear voices. They might feel like they have some sort of powers. It might feel like that people are out to get them. They might see shadows in the distance. A lot of paranoia. It can be really terrifying.
And essentially, it's brain damage.
Essentially.
Okay. So how do we talk to our kids about this in a way that they will listen? I should say you're also a mom of 3 kids. The last one just turned 18, so you've actually raised 3 adults, so I know you've been through it.
I have, and it's been a wild ride.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody that has teenagers knows that they feel like they know everything.
Yeah.
So it's really important to approach them in a way where you're sort of meeting them where they're at. So if you come at them with judgment, if you come at them with rules, they're going to shut down. They're not going to hear you. I would suggest approaching your child if you feel like they're using marijuana. You know, what are you getting out of this? Like, why does this make you feel good? What is it about marijuana that you like? Because at that point, you can sort of get the underlying reasons why they're using it, and you might be able to throw in something else that they could do instead. You know, at Newport, you know, when we treat teenagers, we take away their screens, we take away their access to drugs, and we open their eyes to other things. You know, we do adventure therapy, art therapy, yoga, music therapy. We really try to put in things that can build those endorphins and make them feel good without using substances.
So how do you know if your kid really has a problem?
I mean, you really have to watch your kids closely, and you really have to look for signs like, you know, not wanting to hang out with their friends anymore, not wanting to go out anymore.
Or what if they do want to hang out with their friends, but you know those friends are smoking marijuana?
Right. Well, I mean, that's another issue as well. But you'll see them sort of disconnect from their life, the things that were important to them previously. Maybe they're not playing sports anymore. Maybe they're not interested in the same passions they had, hobbies that they had. You know, they're not upset by the same things that they used to be upset by. You know, they have sort of like a, it is what it is sort of attitude. You know, you're just watching for subtle changes. That's really what you're looking for.
So, if you are having this conversation, I know I'm hearing some parents going right now, if I find out my kid's smoking marijuana, I don't care, they're grounded. Yet most psychologists that I interview or people who work in this space would say that's probably not the right way to handle it. What do you do?
Well, I mean, you want to preserve the relationship. You want your child to be able to come to you and say, this is what I'm struggling with, and to keep those lines of communication open. So you really have to sort of meet them where they're at. Like, yeah, it's tough, and I understand things are tough, and maybe this is something that seems like an option for you to turn to because, you know, you're struggling and it helps calm you down. But again, like explaining to them in a non-judgmental way that these are some of the things that might happen if you go down this path. And these are the kinds of things that I worry about for you. You know, what might you be worried about? You know, what is it that you're trying to get out of this?
And if they say, Mom, I'm just having fun, and well, everyone does it. All kids do this. I'm just doing it once in a while on the weekends, or you know, I don't know, teens have things that they say if you're lucky enough to get them to tell the truth.
Right. I mean, what you're doing is planting seeds. You're planting kernels of seeds and thoughts, letting them know that it's not quite as safe as they think it is, letting them know it's not quite as prevalent as they think it is, and that going down that path could lead to bad things. And then stepping back and letting those seeds sort of sow, and keeping those lines of communication open.
If we want to search to find out, I mean, parents are snoops sometimes, we have to be. So what are we looking for? I
mean, clearly, you know, anyone that's been to high school knows what it smells like.
Right, except now there's a different game, you said. So people might be looking for something that looks a little more electronic, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could be looking for vapes. You could be looking for, you know, little cartridges of fluid. Okay,
so the thing that they put inside looks like a little
vape
cart
is itself
a bigger thing.
It's like a little metal thing. It could be long and skinny. It could be short and fat. You know, they come in all different shapes and sizes. And then they put little glass containers of fluid in them.
And that's the most dangerous
because that fluid is heated up into a vapor, and that's what they're inhaling.
So we just had a story in the news about how vapes, again, not regulated, and that how bad they are with people who are using e-cigarettes because the heat is creating. AI actually did the scan of like 100 different compounds that could cause big problems. So same thing. I mean, I guess, is there even a gradation of, okay, work with me here to the teenager of I never want you doing it through a vape because that's that much more dangerous than natural stuff, or not. They're all dangerous.
I mean, that goes back to sort of harm reduction.
Yeah.
You know, do you want to allow some things because they're going to need to make their own mistakes, or are you going to crack down and say no to everything? And that's, of course, a personal thing. And every parent has to sort of decide where their boundaries lie as far as that goes. But it is a fact that vapes can be more dangerous and more addictive and much higher potency.
But the other thing that people have to realize, if these teens are getting it, and somehow they do, and I guess anyone who's been to high school remembered that there were other people who did that too, but if they're getting it and it's not the real marijuana from the dispensary, there's a lot of synthetic marijuana out there that has the cannabis leaves on it, and that's something the state has a public relations campaign going on right now, that they almost look, they have flavors, and they're really just plant material that's been sprayed with a synthetic THC. Can you talk about that, and is that even more dangerous?
Yeah, that's, you know, that can, some people call it K2, you know, it's synthetic marijuana. It's quite dangerous, actually, and it has a sort of a different effect on teenagers. It can create aggression, it can create anger, it can create, you know, signs of psychosis, and it can be very, very dangerous.
Addictive?
Addictive, yes. I mean, addictive, you're talking about chemically addictive, but you're also talking about teenagers using these substances as a coping skill. And if that's the only coping skill in your arsenal, you know, it's a bad place to be, because it makes it very hard to let go of it. If that's the only thing that's calming you or bringing you relief from whatever you're going through, you know, it's going to be really hard to let go of. And that's why, you know, at Newport we replace that with other things, and we try to show kids that there's other things that can make you feel better and other skills you can use besides substances that can help you cope.
Are you seeing that the idea that it's so much more prevalent, that it seems some articles I've been reading have said that, you know, this generation thinks it's no big deal at all. In fact, many of them might be smoking pot rather than drinking. Yes. Is that true?
I think that could be true. I mean, just seeing my kids' friends, you know, they don't really get together to drink. You know, they get together to go in the woods and hang out. You know, and it's very hard to explain to them. You know, they think that they're smoking a plant that's naturally occurring. This is so much better than
alcohol
drinking,
but it's not.
But it really isn't.
So from a medical perspective, what would be the difference? Because teens experiment with alcohol too. Is one even safer than the other?
I mean, I'm a big proponent that you know, everyone's going to try a little of something. Anything in excess is going to be bad for you. It's going to cause brain issues, and alcohol's no different than that.
Except the danger with marijuana is that you're saying this kid who had the psychotic episodes,
right,
got bad marijuana. So your time of trying it might be, you're saying he wished he never did it. It may not be the difference of you tried a few beers and you threw up.
Right, exactly.
Versus you got this bad marijuana.
You've permanently altered your brain chemistry.
And there's no way to know if that's going to happen.
There's no way to know. There's no way to know. I read somewhere that a scientist said that if you're going to try marijuana, try it past the age of 25 or 26. Because it's just, your brain is in a very different place at that age. Not that it's really ever good to try substances, but as a teenager, it has profound effects.
And is there a way for parents to find out other than seeing it? Like, what if they wanted to test them, or should they do that?
Test their kids? I mean, again, that goes down to your parenting style, but sort of tricking your kids or trying to catch them in the act is going to put them on notice that you're not a safe person to go to with problems.
So that's not the best way to do it. I'm just wondering, like, is there even such thing as a drug test that would pick it up?
There are drug tests that would pick it up, sure.
Like people, I've heard of parents saying, I'm going to take a hair out of their brush and figure this out. So hair strands can work. And
of course, K2, synthetic marijuana, doesn't always show up on drug tests.
Okay.
So
I mean, and really, I think I want to echo what you're saying, is that every time I have someone who's been skilled in dealing with teens about these issues, they always say the most important thing is trust. And so you're saying that the first thing is really to get an open conversation going.
Yeah.
But I guess when you're hearing this podcast or this show, if you're watching it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. Like, they could be damaging their brain forever. I can't just have a conversation. So, worrying that they might try it again parenting's the hardest job in the world, but
it certainly is.
Is there, from your side of the couch and how you're running this, what do you want parents to understand as they try to get a better handle on this?
Well, I mean, your kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to try things. They're going to do stupid things. At least until their prefrontal cortex is fully functional. So you're not going to be able to control everything they do. And really, it's so important for them to be able to come to you and say, Mom, I did a stupid thing. And then you can guide them. And every one of those moments is so meaningful and so valuable that your kids are going to do these things one way or another. But if you are there and you're trusting and those lines of communication are open, they're going to be able to come to you, and you're going to be able to guide them. And kids, when you talk to them, they'll tell you that their parents are their biggest influencers. So we may not realize we're making a difference to them, but we are.
And we can all look back on that and remember what Mom said or what Dad said, even
Absolutely.
though we were not listening or claimed to not be listening at that time.
But it sticks.
It sticks.
And that's what I was saying about planting those seeds.
So as a parent, I mean, I know some parents who are like, I am building trust, so I just want them to tell me. So it's okay. I need to just know when you're doing this. I want to keep you safe. I'll even let you do it in the backyard. I hear this talk of like, I just want to keep my kids safe. The other version would be like, I never want you doing this. Please don't ever do it. If you are going to do it, I need to know about it. Like, I mean, so what's the? It's hard for parents to figure out the way to lay this out.
Yeah, I mean, sanctioning it and allowing it in your own home is very different than saying, I have concerns. I don't want you to be doing this. I understand that I don't have complete control over you, but these are my concerns.
Yeah,
that's a very different message than, I know you're going to do this. I want you to do it here. I'm going to get you the stuff from the dispensary so you can be safe. It's a different message. Yeah. One is putting a stamp of approval, and one is saying, I have concerns, but I realize that some of this is outside of my control.
Yeah, yeah. And then, but building that trust, if parents do recognize, and they come home and they find the stuff, is it, that's the time you want to have a level-headed conversation, not like, look what I found, you told me you didn't do this, or, you know, so if that moment happens and you wish you had a psychologist to call to ask yourself how to handle this, what would you say?
Well, we don't always handle everything perfectly as parents, even when we're in the field. But that would be the time where I would say, look, I really need to speak with you. This is what I found. This is not something that I feel comfortable with, but I understand that this is something that you're doing. I'd really want to talk to you about my concerns. Yeah. And let them know, do your research, have your facts ready. Don't try to data dump on your kids because they're going to shut down, but let them know these are some things that could happen, and I really want you to think about that and think about why you're doing this, and maybe you and I together can come up with something that you could do instead that might give you the same feeling. Mm-hmm.
So much of it, I think, is the peer pressure, right? When I was growing up, it was the campaign of just say no. And how do you tell kids? Because eventually, sadly, if they end up with you where they have to go to rehab and then go back to the world, they have to go back and see friends. They have to go back into that world where maybe other people don't think it's a big deal. How do you tell kids how they can exist, have fun, and not feel like they have to do these things to fit in?
Well, I mean, we've had quite a few kids that leave our treatment center, and they actually go back to their friends, and they let them know, hey, you don't have to do drugs to feel great. Here's all these other great things. I learned MMA, and this is what I do when I'm feeling bad. And share with them what they've learned. A lot of times kids will cave to pressure because they don't know what the other options are, and they don't feel brave enough to say, you do what you want to do, but I'm not going to do that. That's not my thing.
Not my thing. Yeah. And the bottom line is, it usually only takes a couple of times. If you're that kid, and I was that kid who said no, and I'm not judging people who didn't, but if there was a thing going around where, you know, after a few times the person, oh, no, thanks, they don't have to give some big explanation.
Yeah, exactly.
Eventually, you don't get asked anymore.
Right, exactly.
And it's not that you're not going to go to the same party in college or whatever. You're just going to be over there with the other. There are plenty of other kids who might also be making that choice.
Right, exactly. And just sort of arming your kids and letting them know, you know, you don't have to do what your friends are doing. You don't have to do that to be accepted. You know, you might be the exception to the rule, but it's okay. It's okay to stand up for that.
So as we come in our last 3 minutes, I'd like to give people some practical, like the top 3 action steps. I think the #1 lesson to take away here is that marijuana isn't this drug that's no big deal, especially now with a teenager. This is a big deal.
And watch your kids. You know your kid better than anyone else. If you see marked differences, step in, but don't step in with judgment and be rash. Step in with support and a conversation and letting them have some space to tell you why they're doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And making them aware, because from your experience, a lot of these kids don't realize.
They don't know.
They have no idea that marijuana, they're saying, okay, I would never do cocaine because that's dangerous, but they don't think marijuana is dangerous.
Exactly.
So that education piece can make a difference.
Exactly. So do your research, know your facts, and speak to your kids from a place of knowing, and then let them make some decisions.
And the difference of doing it as an adult, because adults might be listening going, well, I go to the dispensary and I once in a while like my marijuana, or they take it for medical reasons. What you're saying here is it's very different because the brain is still forming, much like a pregnant woman can't do everything that everyone else is doing. When you're a teenager, you can't do what the 25-year-old's doing.
Exactly. Your brain is developed and it's got a much less impact for an adult brain than it does on a teenager, young adult brain.
Okay. Synthetic marijuana also, when you're looking out for these things, you might see the synthetic kind that has cartoons and things, and it almost looks like
they know
food.
how to package it.
Yeah, I mean, we had the Attorney General on, and there were gummies, there's food that's flavored like Doritos.
There's soda.
Soda. And those things are even worse.
They can be, because it's hard to stop eating candy. You know, it doesn't feel like you're doing drugs. It doesn't feel like you're, you know, it's very hard to regulate the amount you take.
Okay. And just keeping in mind that there is no regulation on this. So what's in that vape or what's in that stuff that your kid might not even realize it's different than real cannabis. It's just plant material that's been sprayed with toxins, sometimes coming from China.
Exactly.
Okay. So shout out where parents can get help. We've got 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Newport
absolutely. You can come to the Newport Healthcare website. We have many, many levels of care for kids that are struggling and young adults. And 211 is always a good resource as well.
Well, I hope this has been educational for everyone at home. My hope is I'll be able to go listen to this show with my teenagers and that they'll actually at least listen to half of it, even though their mom is doing it. But these are important conversations. I hope it's been educational for you. Helene, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Kara.
All right, everyone, have a great day and be well.